I'll be giving an introduction on user interface design, so this will not include any code or Xcode or Swift at all. Basically, if you've seen the WWDC sessions on the WWDC design sessions, you should be familiar with some of this. But if you haven't, then this is going to be something new. So we'll be talking about these six principles today: consistency, navigation, clarity, uh, typography, glyphs, and errors. So let's start with consistency. So how would you interact something like this? How do you interact with it? The answer is pretty obvious. You'll twist the dial. How do you go back to the home screen? You press the home button, and that's when you go back to the home screen. And obviously, this is on. So they develop a the users develop an understanding of how different devices work by using them over a period of time. So these are called mental models. So you have to twist the dial. You know that state is on. You know how to go back to the home screen. But what if I told you had to push the dial inwards to change the value? Now, this doesn't look very intuitive. Like, would your user ever figure that thing out? Like, chances are they'd consider it broken and never use it again. So, like following platform conventions help you step away from those UI pitfalls. Like you're not challenging people's mental models because they're usually developed on the system apps. They use system apps more than third-party applications. So it's best to use the platform conventions as much as possible. So like a share button like this, wouldn't necessarily convey the same meaning to an iOS user when all of the apps use this icon instead. So if you're using that kind of a share button, like it's not very intuitive. Like the user will have to like understand that that's a share button. Same with your navigation. The back button is always on the top left corner, and it always has a swipe gesture. That's the system convention. So something like this doesn't look really good. Like, this is weird. You have a back button on the right side. I've never really got around using that. Some of the other platform conventions are like positive actions are always on the right, and negative actions are always on the left. So this is the standard um, location access alert window. So allows on the right and don't allows on the left. Pretty sure this will not work. Like you're more likely to make a mistake in this one. Same goes for icons. So this thing means search on iOS, but if you use it for magnifying, right, then you'll probably face a lot of issues. iOS apps also have autosave, so when you're doing something on iOS, your content gets saved automatically. You should not expect your users to press this kind of a button. So like MS Word has this still, but like, I don't think any other app would be able to justify this button. Um, Moving on to navigation. So every app has features, and it's really important for each of these features to be easy to discover and access. So a good navigation structure is very very important for that kind of stuff. Uh, Good navigation structures usually answer three questions properly. They tell you where you are, where you can go, and what will you find when you reach there. So let's say that you're driving and you reach Dwarka. So, and this is the signboard that greets you. It's a good signboard. It tells you where you are. You move a little further, and you see this one. So it's telling you where you can go. You can go to the left, or you can go straight. It's telling you what will you find when you reach there. You'll find a college 400 meters to the left. You'll find an airport 4 kilometers ahead. So it's telling you all the information of a good navigation structure. Same goes for UI elements inside your app. So this is the standard navigation bar on iOS. Tells you where you are, where you can go back, and what will you find when you reach there. So you'll see the iCloud mailbox when you reach there. Same goes for the tab bar, where you are. Where can you go? What do you find when you reach there? But what about this icon? Where are you? Where can you go? Absolutely no information, absolutely no context. So maybe this is not the best option. So, like,
So you're absolutely right that navigation bar is a very integral part of the iOS apps. But recently, when I got back to developing again, I realized App Store has completely changed their UI aesthetics.
yeah,
And now they have that card format which expands and contracts, right?
yeah.
So, and that does not have a navigation bar.
So not all view controllers need a navigation bar. That card format, it's supposed to be part of one flow. So when you tap on the Today app, it will show a pop-up screen. So that doesn't really need to have a navigation bar because uh, it's not a different view controller. You're not moving somewhere else into the app. It's just an extension of that screen. So what are the alternatives to a hamburger menu? So you don't want to use a hamburger menu in your app because it doesn't tell you a lot about the navigation. It doesn't give you a lot of context of where the user can go or like what are the options to navigate inside the app. So what can you do instead of a hamburger menu?
Quick question. So, does Google has any guidelines around what is the intention guide hamburger menu? Like, recently they have this huge thing called material design.
Yeah.
Before that, they had some guidelines as well. So, does Google like have any?
So Google's platform convention is using hamburger menu everywhere, and people on Android they realize like what hamburger menu is going to have in store for them. It's going to have account information and a couple of other navigational elements. So when you're using an Android phone, you kind of expect that thing. So you develop a mental model yourself, and like whatever the guidelines may be for Android, like, they won't necessarily put to iOS. But yes, the material design thing does have guidelines for hamburger menus and what kind of stuff.
But we have so many of iOS app that having the side panel.
Yeah.
So we are representing with that hamburger. So
Yeah.
it's
Also,
a basic.
in the iPad flow, in the master detail controller, isn't there an iPad hamburger design by default in the iOS?
No, that's not a hamburger design. It's the split view controller that you're talking about. There's a left hand side. So that's more contextual than a hamburger menu in the sense that it's not just three lines that don't say a lot about what's there in the backend side. It's more it gives you a descriptive information. It tells you where you're going to go. It tells you that so let's say you're using a Reddit client. So it will. So if there's a subreddits column where you can select all the subreddits, it's going to point you and say at the top, it's going to give you a label that says subreddits. That's more informative than a hamburger menu. It's essentially something like a drawer itself, but uh, like, that should be used only when it's absolutely necessary to. Like you have to have 10,000 uh, buttons in your navigation menu. That's when you should be using that. But most apps can generally do good with tab bars.
Also, it takes a lot of time. Like,
Yeah.
it's double click. If I
Yeah.
need to constantly switch between two, then
Yeah, a tab bar is a much better option.
Yeah.
If you've nailed down your primary navigation to like 4 screens or 5 screens, this is a great option to provide navigation. Like you shouldn't really be going towards hamburger menus at that point.
Can we use a sliding tab bar or we should stick to 5?
You should stick to 5. There's no the platform conventions for us. There are no platform conventions for a sliding tab bar, but there are conventions for having more than one element. Let's say that you have 6 elements in your tab bar. So after adding the sixth element, it will add a more tab to that screen, and when you go to the more tab, you can select the element
That's
that you want.
the hamburger.
no,
No.
You have
No.
bar screen on the last option, like the search, you get 3 dots and it'll say like
More. So you can access more navigation if you want to. But
You still have those first 4 options available
Yeah.
at one tap.
And once you selected the screen from the more menu will have reference to that. So if you want to select the other screen, you need to tap more once again. So it again saving you one tap to go to the hamburger menu.
yeah. So these are more efficient ways. Of course, like something like a Reddit client won't probably want to have a tab bar because there are so many subreddits. So this is an app called Apollo. What they did is that they use the split view controller. So on the split view controller, on the split view side, there's this list of subreddits which you can select and then go back. It works similar to a hamburger menu, but it's better in the sense that once you go on iPad, you'll always have a split view that's visible, and secondly, it's more contextual.
No, but also this is because of the fact that tab bars are majorly for completely
Yeah.
different flows, right?
Yeah.
This is just one flow but different content.
Yeah.
So that makes sense.
Yeah.
Do you think it will be a good design if, what if that bottom bar,
Yeah.
we can maybe scroll a bit, not scroll actually, but increase the height of that thing. Maybe we can maybe have a swipe gesture, which kind of makes it one line to a two line thing, and we can see more options.
Actually,
Not
that's
necessarily.
what he was saying. I was saying sliding.
No,
Yeah, swipe.
that's different.
You are saying
sliding.
horizontal.
I'm saying you swipe up,
Okay,
and
swipe
the,
up.
the bar becomes longer,
Yeah.
like twice the height.
So the Apple interface guidelines, they suggest progressive disclosure. They say that nail down your primary navigation to 4 or 5 maximum elements, and then progressively disclose information. So their idea is that you shouldn't actually be having more than 5 items in your tab bar. Like everything else that has to be disclosed should be disclosed somewhere else inside the app. So let's say the music app. It has a library screen, but it does not have a downloaded music screen. When you go to the library, it discloses you that information where you can access it at that point of time. So like you can place these. If you have 12 elements, then you probably should be thinking about like how to like progressively disclose them, how to create a navigation structure. That's like primary navigation structure should be like 4 elements or 5 elements at max, and then you progressively disclose all the other information.
Yeah, but as you said that in this model,
Yeah.
there is a single screen content design. You know, like that split bar जो दिख रहा है, वो उसी
Yeah.
screen में दिख रहा है. वैसे
Yeah.
when you will swipe up, so you have to like make a different process. It will like main screen से it will हटके, you will like it will open like.
It's like the Notes app. It's like the Notes app.
Yeah.
So when you go to the Notes app, you select the note. You have to swipe back and then select the note that you want to. You tap on it and then you start editing on it. It's that kind of a user flow.
But if there was a tab bar where you could swipe up, that would still require 2 interactions to get to one or so.
Okay.
So then you might as well just use more buttons. You might as well just use more buttons.
Yeah, it might interfere with that as well. So the iPhone 10 guidelines are absolutely, they say that keep the bottom area free of swipe gestures. So some good tab bar practices. So selected and unselected states. So these states show that unselected state, and this is a selected state example. So what I wanted to show over here is that there are two things to keep in mind when you're showing a selected state. First is that there shouldn't just be a color differentiation. So if the selected state is gray and the selected state is blue and the unselected state is gray, there should be more differentiation than that. So over here the glyphs get a slightly thicker stroke width, and the text on the description text, it's also moved from regular font face to medium font face.
Why is that?
To show like the idea is that the color shouldn't be the differentiating factor to show between selected and unselected states, because not everyone is able to decipher between two different colors.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Accessibility.
Yeah. And secondly, so if you put your phone in grayscale mode, you won't be able to recognize what's the selected state and what's the unselected state. But when you have clear typographic differences and clear stroke differences, then you know. And secondly, the thing is, so over here the 3 icons are filled, and the fourth one, it has just an increased stroke width. So that's because you want to preserve your context. This doesn't work really well. So the search icon has completely changed to something else now. So you really want to preserve the context of your icon when you're deciding to fill it or increasing the stroke width. So as a programmer, you don't really need to take a lot of care about it. You need to ask your designer to give you two different graphics.
This is
That's
when
all.
you say that it just feels right.
Yeah.
So there's one more thing about tab bars. I had a question about it.
Yeah.
In iOS 10, the style was a bit different, where like it was when the unselected one it didn't have a fill,
Yeah.
and the selected one had a fill.
Yeah.
So if you're supporting iOS 10, is it a good idea to have the on to detect iOS 10
Absolutely.
have that style
Yeah.
on iOS 10 and keep the new style on iOS 11.
So if you want to do that extra work, you can do it. But so the idea is that the weight of the icons should match the weight of the font. So if you think that the previous style matches your flow better, you could use it on both iOS 11 and both iOS 10. But if you want to support both icons, that's really good. Like, like you're going an extra step. That's a good thing to do. So a tip about horizontal collection views. So these kind of horizontal collection views, so it's really important to understand when you have horizontal collection views, it's not really intuitive if to tell that there's something more on the right side of the screen, because over here I can just see three icons. I don't know what's on the like what's on the right of the screen, and I won't really intuitively figure out that it's scrollable. So a good method would be to provide a cutoff, like not integral values inside a horizontal view, like 3.5 cells. So that would be a good method. So you can just that there's something more on the right side of the screen. This can be done in using the UI collection view delegate flow layout. You can do this programmatically. A good idea is to provide left and right section insets to match the margins of your uh, the outside of the layout outside of the collection view, and you want to provide the cutoff on both the sides of the screen once you start scrolling. So you want the collection views width to be equal to the super views width. Let's move on to clarity. Well-designed apps are easy to use and understand. This is a phrase we've often heard. The first step is using easy to understand language. This is pretty scary. You shouldn't be using big words in your app. Try to use small words. Try to use words that don't require a dictionary. You shouldn't be like your user shouldn't be opening up a dictionary app to just use the application. Use small words. Use easy to understand words. Avoid jargon. This is not how the setting screens looks like nobody would be able to figure out this is Wi-Fi. So avoid jargon of all kinds. Provide feedback. So this is a screenshot from the mail app. It's telling me it's an unread message. It's an unread mail. How it tells me is that it uses an indicator. There's a blue indicator at the top of the screen. Uh, yeah, and the name is also in bold. So I know that it is an unread message. So using indicators is good. Using more differentiating factors is a good practice. But what if it started blinking? What if every time I opened a mailbox and all the unread mails, they started blinking at me? I scrolled it and they'll blink further. Like that's not good. So avoid blinkers. Like the food delivery apps use a lot of this thing. Like yeah, yeah, yeah. So that is not the best possible way to get your attention. That you have elements moving inside of your table view cells while you're scrolling. Like that's a distraction, not an attention. Same with shine effects. Like I don't want my mail to show a shine effect. So avoid.
Shimmer.
So you should be showing the system status also properly. Show the selected states. So your selected states should be clearly defined. Maybe through a header that tells you the title properly, or if you're in the tab bar, you should show the selected state properly. Or so we all know about action controllers. So these are great loading screens, but they're only great when they're for a short duration of time. I'm pretty sure this is very frustrating. The activity indicators. So they're ideal for very short duration of time. But when you're going for longer durations, you probably want a progress bar. So this is going to take the same time to load as the previous screen, but this is way more easy to watch than the activity.
Dissatisfying.
Yeah, way more satisfying because you know how much progress has been made.
Also, it keeps the user safe.
Yeah,
It's giving hope,
Yeah,
basically.
like, it's going to get completed.
Obviously, I think in Let's See, user interaction free as well.
Yeah. So activity indicators are ideal for short durations, like 3 seconds or 3 seconds, 5 seconds at max. But if you have something like a 10-second waiting time, then you probably want to use progress bars. Provide meaningful choices. So let's say I want to cancel a subscription for a movie streaming service. So this is the message that I received. Would you like to cancel your subscription? Okay and cancel. So what do I choose? Should I choose okay or cancel? Where will I end up? This can be solved easily by like picking up the right words. Don't cancel and cancel are probably much better. Moving on to the next topic, typography. Now this is a question that I've often heard, like which font should I be using for my app? So should it be Avenir? Looks like a great humanist font. Should it be Futura? It's very, very cool. Maybe Helvetica, or maybe San Francisco. The thing with San Francisco is that which one? San Francisco display or San Francisco text? Which one do you use? And moreover, since in the last 3 years that San Francisco has existed, there have been San Francisco UI, and San Francisco Pro. So which one of the three? And then which one of the display or
And
text?
there's also SF mode.
Yeah, there's a SF mono as well. So which one should you pick up? Turns out in most cases that using the system font is the best option. UI font.system font, it takes care of all the different San Francisco fonts that exist. It updates the font automatically. So let's say in iOS 12 they have SF Pro 2. You don't have to update it manually. UI system font will take care of that. And so if you're in iOS 11, it will fall back to SF Pro. If you're in iOS 12, it will use the new one. Same for the text sizes. So like what is the size for heading? What is the size for regular text? So ideally, if you go online, you'll get recommendations that 17 points is the size for regular text, and 34 points is the size for headings. There's nothing wrong in that. That's probably accurate, but it's not great for accessibility. So using the dot preferred font for text styles, it takes care of the font sizes. So you just have to tell it's a heading or it's a large title, it's a body text, and it takes care of the text size automatically. It detects what the user's accessibility preferences are in dynamic type. So let's say somebody who is above the age of 40, he wants to have larger text, and your app doesn't support dynamic type. 17 points is going to ruin the experience for him. So at that point of time, this kind of a function is really helpful.
What if I wanted to get this feature but a custom font? Can I do that?
Yeah, you can do that. You can build an extension that selects the this function, and it will return the font size for you. So you can get the font size from this, but it's always going to call this function. So you'll always get the right font size instead of hard coding the values. So some best practices for typography: use a single font family whenever possible. So using multiple fonts may seem cool, but it can also make your app feel fragmented and show a lack of consistency. This this is probably much better than the previous screen because this uses the same font as opposed to the previous one. Use emphasis to establish visual hierarchy. Use color. Use font weights. So like separate the unrelated text from the related text. It shouldn't be a block of 9 lines, which is very hard to read. Like make it 3 lines or make it like differentiated with bold text and a proper white spacing. Use legible text sizes. Again, like supporting dynamic type and preferred font size format that will take care of all this. But if you're using custom font sizes and like extremely low font sizes and extremely low contrast colors, they're going to affect your readability. Is proper line spacing. So one of the things that developers do very often is that they contract the line spacing to fit in more text. So that's not exactly very the right thing to do, because once you have a lot of text, you want a lot of line spacing. You want it to be 1.25 points or 1.5 points, because when you have a lot of information to read, it's good to have a lot of white space as well, so that the user doesn't feel like he's reading a lot of content. So use proper line spacing.
What is the default one?
The default is 1.2, I think. So glyphs. So what do these mean? No idea. It could mean anything. But what do these mean? So they're very self-explanatory. There's an alarm clock, there's a camera, there's a video camera. So glyphs are universally understood. Don't make glyphs that are just a triangle, just a hexagon. That is probably not going to be understood by everyone. So let's suppose we are designing a printer icon, and this seems pretty good. There's a paper roll that's coming from the back. There's a paper that's printing out. There's a heads-up display that's probably giving information about the what is going to get printed, and there's a power on and off button. So pretty descriptive for an icon. But what happens when you see it in 1x? You, yeah, it's too detailed, and probably the user won't be able to make out that it's a print icon. So like using something simpler might help. You can also figure it out on 1x. So they should be simple. Like I know adding a lot of details can be fun, but for glyphs they should be like single line, single shape, not a lot of complex shapes.
A lot of apps have also moved into the same minimal context,
Yeah.
like Airbnb and
Yeah, Airbnb is a great example.
yeah, very close.
Yeah.
Sunil, by the way, works at it. Who? Sunil. He's actually a singer.
Okay. So there's something odd about this. I've centered the play button to the circle, but doesn't really look centered. But this one looks centered, right? So the difference is that when you're centering stuff, it centers around a rectangle. And the center of a rectangle that encloses a triangle may not be the center of a triangle. So there's an optical imbalance that's created. So you may think that it's a center, but it's not actually a center.
Is there a technique to fix it?
Yeah. So the technique is like optically balancing your icons. There is no science to it. You don't have to. There are no set values. You just have to figure out by looking at it. But the good thing is that you can tell your designers to give you the required padding.
If you want to look at the triangle, now it's probably centered at its center of mass.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. So like I've added adequate padding to the left and right side, and now when I'm using this square, it's centered to the right thing.
I think material design does a good job explaining this. I guess.
I haven't read the guidelines yet.
So
But
they use Fab a lot in the labs. So Fab also needs to have optically centered, not actually centered. So they have a good documentation how much. What is Fab? That is like a floating action.
Floating action button.
So if a button, so every screen would have a one unique action or the most important action, and that action would be a button which kind of floats on the screen every.
Like create a mail in Gmail, that lower bottom right corner.
So they have to do a good job explaining what is the difference between center and optical.
And there's also something called optical balancing. So like let's see these three icons from the tab bar previously. And they all look the same size, but they're not actually the same size. Like the heart is slightly smaller than the rectangle on the left, and the search icon is slightly smaller than the heart. So the same technique of optically balancing the play button, that's also being used over here. So it gives you a perception. So if the heart were the same size as the rectangle, it will probably appear larger than the rectangle. So like optically balancing these icons is also important. The good thing is that you don't have to do all this programmatically. You can tell your designers to optically center your graphics, and probably a good tool for that is using the sketch symbols. It has a sample template for the UI bar button
It's
item.
very useful too.
Actually, I think
It's in the default thing. So glyphs are universally understood, simple, optically balanced. But there's something more to the glyphs as well. Glyphs are a lot like typographic elements. Like glyphs and typographic glyphs have a lot of similarity. They also have a weight balance. So something like this looks awkward because the text on the right is bold and the glyph on the left has a very small stroke width. But this will look better, right? Same goes for the, like, if I were to reduce the weight of the font, probably this looks better, or this looks better as well. So they should be contextually aware, like how bold is the text on the right side, uh, and how thick are the stroke lines on the left. So a good example for this is the 3D Touch menu, the quick actions menu in 3D Touch. It has bold fonts. So using bold, slightly thicker uh, stroke widths for your glyphs on that is probably better as compared to using glyphs on the tab bar, where you might want slightly thinner glyphs or maybe full filled glyphs on that side. So something looks a little odd on this slide as well. It's, it's not contextually aware, is it? This looks slightly better.
It looked fine to us before.
So these are the standard glyph sizes. You can notice how like circular glyphs and square glyphs are different. So like circular glyphs have a slightly larger standard size compared to square glyphs. This is all about optically.
iOS specific.
Yeah, this is iOS specific. This is iOS specific for the tab bar icons. So there's a regular tab bar on iOS, there's a compact tab bar. So both of them have different sizes. So when you're generating assets for the tab bar, you should probably consider these. Like export them in 2x and 3x.
Use a triangle. Randomly decide
Yeah.
इतना सही लग रहा है इतना बड़ा है चलेगा.
Yeah, like they have documentation for this, like in the human interface guidelines. So handling errors. So we all know what happened over here. Warren Beatty received the wrong card. That resulted in all this infamous Oscar fiasco. So whose fault was it? The accountant from PwC was found responsible. He gave the wrong card. So Beatty announced the wrong winner. But why couldn't Beatty figure out that the card he received wasn't for the best picture? Let's take a closer look at the image.
So is everyone aware of what happened actually? Right?
So this is the Oscars card that Warren Beatty received. And you can probably see that the best actress is written way too down and in way too small font. It looks good because it's elegant and stuff, but it's not very readable. And on the other hand, the name for the movie and the name for the winner, they're far more readable.
The guy was pretty old now.
Yeah, that too. And this is what the envelope looked like. Again, low contrast, not readable at all. Like, add flashlights to it, and you'll probably only be able to figure out something right. So, best actress, the font is too small. It's too far down on the card. It's low contrast. Text on the envelope is also. So it probably wasn't legible to BT at all. He only looked at La La Land and announced the winner. So thankfully the Academy didn't make a change this year, and they had Warren Beatty announce the winner again. And this is what the card looked like. Now we have a better designed card. The best picture title is on the top. It's more readable. The winner, the name of the winner is different from the name of the details. Is different from the details of the winner. So that's a good addition too. So you'll probably know if it's a movie, then you'll know that it's a movie that's winning, as opposed to an actress. No fiasco this year, even though Warren Beatty was announcing it again. Same for this. So are you aware of this incident where an erroneous message was displayed in Hawaii? Says that a ballistic missile is inbound. So in this particular case, it was probably the mistake of the worker who was doing it, because he heard an erroneously played recording. But it's still worth looking at the UI for issuing this alert. This is what the UI looks like. So how do you figure out which one's a drill, which one's an actual message, and which one should you be pressing? So they're all in the same drop-down link. There's no visual differentiation. There is the important warnings and messages. They're mixed with drills and slightly less important messages as well. And there's no way to undo your action. So once the message is sent, you can't take it back. So there's a solution for this. Like, you could differentiate. You could differentiate your test messages with alert and warnings, and you can differentiate your drill messages with the actual messages. And like providing more, so more important warnings and alerts to be slightly above, and like less important ones to be slightly below. So you know which one you're pressing, and you can always undo the action. So human error is rarely solely caused by humans. It's the design of the app that helps a lot in making those errors happen. So some best practices to help prevent errors in your app. So allow users to undo and redo their actions. So even if they make a mistake, they can always undo. One good example is WhatsApp. You can always delete your messages now. So making this error is very very frequent. You can, like, you make errors in sending messages to the wrong group all the time. The good thing is that in WhatsApp you can delete that message instantly, so the user will not be able to read that. That's a good example of undoing your actions. Support non-destructive editing whenever possible. So in the Photos app, if you are making changes, you're applying filters, and like, you are changing the exposure and you're changing the color brightness, you can always press the cancel button and discard all the changes. Like, none of this editing is destructive. Like, even if you've applied the filter, you've applied and you've closed the editing window, you can still go back to the original image. So it's all non-destructive editing.
In this slide, why is the discard changes blue? Shouldn't it be red because that is destructive?
So
No,
that's a positive thing to
discard
use.
changes is not destructive.
Sometimes
It's
it
going
might be
to,
destructive. Like suppose they made a lot of changes and like it's a lot of work
yeah.
and they accidentally press discard changes.
But this is after you press the cancel button. So you are obviously like you're
Okay.
you're making a call to cancel all those changes. It's red on the other menu. That's when you're permanently deleting important information. So like ask the user when you're deleting that stuff. So you're deleting an important mail app should probably ask the user that you really want to delete all this information, or maybe you're formatting your hard disk. Should ask you, like, do you really want to like delete all your data? It's not recoverable. So ask users before making important changes.
And also, I think the UI alert action thing makes it mandatory only to have one destructive and one cancellation.
Yeah. So resolve ambiguity. So one great example is in Siri, where it tries to resolve ambiguities by itself, like by asking the user. So if I set a reminder after 12 a.m. at night, so and I say like remind me tomorrow about something, so it will ask me, like, just to be clear, is it like that by tomorrow? Do you mean the same day, same calendar date, or do you mean the different calendar date? Because like at 12 a.m. at night, I may say tomorrow, but it might mean like the same date, right? So it will resolve that ambiguity for me. Like it will give me the option to resolve the ambiguity.
They should solve this for IRCTC.
Yeah. like book a flight for tomorrow. Like what does tomorrow mean? And respect mental models like this again. So like this is a screenshot from a form, and it's very very easy to clear the form as opposed to like proceeding to the next slide, because proceed is way too under highlighted and clear all is way too highlighted, and it's in the like forward action place. So like I'll probably click clear all more often than proceed. So like, this shouldn't be happening, like, unless you want me to fill the form thrice at least to uh, like confirm it. So this shouldn't be happening. So what if a system fails to perform the task correctly? So that's also an error, right? Handling errors. Provide meaningful information with options to help resolve the error. This is an actual error message that I once received from a movie streaming app. It says unknown error such as live, sorry, and cancel. No relevant information. It creates a dead end with no possible action to be performed. There's an attached cancel button, but that takes you to the previous screen. So what does cancel really mean? There's no meaningful way to resolve the error at that point. I can just tap on the movie again and then try to play it, and it will give me the same snarky remark that will rub salt to my wound, and it will like say like can't such is life. Like what does such is life mean? At that point, I'm probably angry. I don't want to read snarky remarks. And again, avoid jargon. again from a popular TV streaming service, and says SSL error occurred, secure connection could not be made. It's too descriptive. Like instead of unknown error, it's telling me what kind of an error it is. But it's assuming that I know what SSL means. It assuming that I know how to resolve this error, and I probably don't care about any of that. I just want to watch movie. Same with error codes. You cannot expect users to remember error codes. Like what does 42 mean?
Paytm sometime.
What do you think about this idea that, for example, if Apple allows one more button, let's say more something,
Yeah.
you can see much more than what you see right now. You click on the more option, you can actually update the content of the alert view.
Yeah.
Initially it says something wrong happened.
Yeah.
It's filling it up. But it
Okay.
also has a more button. Tap on the more and it shows you the exact error, something wrong. It's very, very descriptive.
That's a good idea. Like if it's a long error message, and if your user is aware of how to resolve that, how to get that descriptive information, and how to handle that to resolve the error, that's a great
When
idea.
you complain about such errors, error code, if labeled to the developer, would be much more helpful to debug it.
Yeah, but like if it's a consumer facing app, let's say I'm using Hotstar and it says error code 42, like where do I put error code 42 to know what is happening with my app?
Sometimes it might be useful to present the error code so the user can Google it or something.
Or maybe you could, like, instead of saying the error code, you can give a 2-line description of what the error is, and then provide
But
the
like,
error
if
code
they Google
for
it,
more
then,
information.
yeah, okay. But like what I'm saying is if they Google it, then they can get like solutions or like some
Yeah.
forums or something.
But I think that's an assumption that they will do it.
But the layman is too lazy to do it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, the
But
user
is
is
there
like,
any way to like put the error code somewhere that it won't be directly in their face, but like they can still see it if they want to?
like when you're selecting
Yeah.
when you're selecting the error code, like when you're selecting the text for an error code, you could specify that for internally for your app, but for the user, it gives me the description of what that error means, and probably it should help me resolve that error as well. So if it's a connection error, it's an internet error, it should tell me like you can either retry by reconnecting your internet, or you can like try contacting your network provider. So that's more helpful than saying like error code 42 and just go Google. So like similar to this is, let's say you have a error message that says about privacy settings. So let's say I'm on Instagram, I want to share a story, but I haven't given it camera access. So it gives me an error. It says that there is no camera access. So a great way to handle that error would be to point me to the place inside the settings app where I can go and get the privacy settings, as opposed to it telling me go to settings, go to this thing. Like just add a button that takes me to the settings of that app, and so I can enable that camera access.
Something like permission scope.
Yeah.
And even I've seen that in Google Map app, they have options how you can go to the thing.
Yeah, but they hasn't given any button.
Yeah, you can actually tap it to go to the settings screen.
And I think we get a question about that. It will be easier for developer to have share code. So actually, I did that in one of the apps. So I actually had the error message in part of a debug mode. So if the mode is debug, I pass the status code as well along with the error alert. Otherwise, yeah, in the production, you just simplify the simplified version. Kind of simple.
So this is an error message from a sample AR app that Apple's published on its website. It says tracking limited point device to an area with visible surface detail or improved lighting conditions. So it's doing two things very good. First is it's providing me the information about error, that tracking is limited. It's unable to detect the surface. It's telling me how to resolve that error. Like I should probably have more details on my screen, probably have more texture, and or probably improve the lighting conditions. If I'm in a dark environment, then probably I should turn on the light. So like it's helping me resolve that error, and it's providing me information about the error. That's what's happening. So like good error handling means provide humanly readable information, point out the problem clearly and precisely, and like help the user resolve the error and provide meaningful choices whenever possible. So we've discussed all 6 of these today. But ultimately, good design is one that delights the users, moves out of the way, doesn't distract you from what you're doing, and fights the user's battles. So it shouldn't have dark patterns inside it. Like the role of a design is good design is not to like entice you to give more data to the app or like entice you to buy more stuff. The good design's idea is to fight the user's battle. It should tell like, okay, so you want to do something, it should allow me to do that thing instead of like providing me with pitfalls where I can make the error and it like benefits somebody else. So you can read more about it. You can view the Apple Human Interface Guidelines. So these are very good. They're historic.
Are there any more books that you can recommend other than this?
The design of everyday things is a very good primer to UI design. There are design sessions as well. If you're interested in typography, there's one by Adobe that says "Stop Stealing Sheep," and so that's about typography itself, typography of signs. Like, so that should give you a good idea of what are legible fonts and what are not legible fonts.
There's also interesting video about designing door handles.
Yeah,
Yeah, so it's a very interesting concept where so probably you can
that's from the Don Norman book.
Okay.
Is that a box one?
Yeah.
One is the box, one is the liver.
Yeah, that's all in this book. That's all in this book.
This is the same guy who wrote in the video in the box.
Yeah, same old guy. That's about it.